So I just want to pay to enter the pin. And as I enter the pin, I want you to watch this. So if we get the request, we'll see here. We'll see the response sent here. Right. So I have done that. Let's wait. And you can see here the response right away. You have the response 200, right, from M-PESA. And then now after that, you see the status is pending. But then if we click on payments, you can see we have this payment that has been made and the amount is 2, right? And then if we go to transactions here, you can see that transaction status has been marked as completed. So that's awesome. And you see, that's basically how it works. So in case you have any question, you can just ask in the comment section there, and I'll be able to reply to that. Thank you so much. And if you are not subscribed to my channel, and you find this content helpful, you can subscribe to my channel for more content like this. So hello guys, and in the last video that I posted on my channel, I talked about how I implemented the Lipa and M-PESA on the kind of an e-commerce store here, which is just a bookstore. And I said that I'm going to explain the application logic in this video here. Now, if you want to follow how this application works, you can go to my channel. This is the video. So Lipa and M-PESA integration, STK push. So that explains how this application works. Now, in this video, I'm going to explain the Lipa and M-PESA logic. Okay, the logic involved. Because if you understand the logic, you can implement it using any other language that you are familiar with. Right, so what is required, or what do you need for you to implement maybe Lipa and M-PESA in your application? First, I believe that your application has it needs to have a payments table, and this is the table that you're going to save the payments from the users. Okay, the payment information. Also, I believe that it should have transactions table. Okay, so the transactions are initialized so that you can know that this payment is for this specific transaction, right? So you have the transaction table. And also, I believe that you need to have the users table, because actually they are the users who are doing this transaction. So there's no way you can do this transaction without the users. Okay, so you have the users table, the transactions table, and the payments table. And these three tables, they have to be related. So for example, at some point, we'll have to get the users transactions. And for us to do that, we need to have a relationship between the transaction and then the users table, right? And also at some point, you'll also need to access the user's payments, or the payment that were made by a specific user. And we have to, for us to do that, we need to relate the users table with the payments table. Now in this case, I'm going to use the Laravel framework. Okay, so let me just explain in summary of how this application works, or how you can implement the payment in your e-commerce application. So you have the payments table. So these payments, the payments information is coming from the payments table. Then you have the transactions table, and these they come from the transaction table. And then you have, of course, the authentication system, because the user, you cannot allow the user to pay unless they are authenticated, just in any basic application. So what happens is that we have goods here. So the user can add the goods to the table, the user can add specific goods that they want to buy to their cart. Okay, and they have to log in first. They have to be authenticated. And then now after that, they are able to add the specific goods to the cart. You can see now they have one book to the added to the cart. All right. And then they are able to check out. They can click on check out with M-PESA. Right. So here we have this item added to the cart. And then you can click this check out to the M-PESA button, and this is what it's going to do. Basically, it is going to initialize the SDK push. Okay. But before this, I just want to run Grok so that in the previous video you'll find out that he had some issues. M-PESA did not send back the response. So I just want to test now and see if the M-PESA is going to send back the response after payment. So I'm just going to go to the Grok here and I'll start it. So my Grok is running on the localhost, and then I'm just going to copy this URL and I'll go to my code, and to the M-PESA controller I'll change the callback URL to that specific URL that you've just gotten. Okay, so now after paying, what is going to happen is that M-PESA is going to send response to this URL here, and that response is going to be received by Grok, and then it is going to be forwarded to our port so that we can to the localhost, and now we can handle it. So when the response comes from M-PESA, it is handled by this method here, SDK push simulation. And I'm going to explain this, but let me just do that so that you can see. Probably, or alternatively, I can just explain. And so we said that we need three tables. That is the payments table, the transactions table, and the users table. So the user has to be there, and the user is the one who is making this payment. And the user has details. So for example, the user has an email address, a phone number, and then others. But what you are concerned with is the phone number, right? So you can do it in this way. You can prompt the user to enter the phone number at the time they are paying, or you can use the default phone number. So you can see these users, in the users table, we have the phone here. So you can use these phone numbers by default, right? So you can just tell them that the font that they submit, they are the ones that are going to be used for payment. And alternatively, during the checkout here, you can have an input field here where you can ask them to enter the phone number that they would like to pay with. If they don't do that, you'll use the default phone number that they registered with. So in this case, I use the default phone number. So you'll not see the phone, but basically what you're using is this phone number that the user registered with. So if they click on checkout, what we do is, let's go to, I explained this table if I'm not wrong, but the transaction table is going to save transactions. And what is a transaction? So a transaction is basically the details of the products that the user is purchasing or is paying for. So when they click on checkout with the M-PESA, you can see you have the transactions table, and new transaction is going to be initialized and saved here with the status. You can see you have the status with pending. So the 0 is pending and 1 is completed. So we first initialize the transaction and set the status to pending. And then after that, we'll continue with processing the payment. So when the payment goes through successfully, that is when we want to create now a new payment, because now a payment will have been done, will have been made. So we'll create a new payment, and the payment with the information that comes from the M-PESA response, right? So the M-PESA is going to send information like M-PESA, the M-PESA receipt ID, the phone number of the user who paid, the amount, and then the date, and then the other details, the balance. Okay, so basically there are a few details that come when you are using Sandbox compared to when you are using live details or live pay bill number. Okay, so the phone is important because you are going to it's going to help you to identify the user who paid that the user who paid um, that specific payment, because you can see M-PESA does not does not return with any other maybe parameter that you can use to identify the user. But if the user used the phone that is registered, we are able to get that user by getting the user whose the user whose the user whose the user whose phone number is equivalent to that phone number. So how do you identify the user who paid or the transaction? So you can use that, or you can use the transaction ID. So for example, when the user is paying, after the user has paid, what happens that you are getting back? We can use this the transaction description here, and you can use the users. This is the reference, but this one you can use the users. This is the account reference, but this one you can use the users the transaction ID. So you can see. Let's just go to this point where somebody is now the SDK push is initialized, because that is the most important thing that in this video, because we're talking about M-PESA, not about the e-commerce side of the application, but the M-PESA. So when they click here, what happens is that this function, this method here, it is called. And what does that method do? So that method gets the request, okay? It gets the cart total and then the user ID, right? And these are important. So if we go to the application, you can see when they click here, the total, the price is this one. And then you have the user ID. Of course, you can get the user ID. It is hidden, right? But you're getting the user ID and the request. And then we find the user who is trying to pay by using just user find, and then you find the user ID. And then after that, I am using some cart implement, some cart package, Laravel cart package, and we can get the cart total by, or the content in the cart by doing this. So just that is the product that the user selected, or the user is paying for, the product information. So if we go to the database, you can see, if you go to the transaction, you can see this cart part. It has the information about the product that the user has selected is paying for. And then we have the transaction ID. So the transaction ID, we are just generating a random string, and then you concatenate to the cart total and then the user ID. And then after that, we have here, we first check if the transaction exists. All right. So I said that we don't want to do, you don't want to do double payment. So you have to check first if there's any pending transaction for that user. And if we find any pending transaction, we just want to cancel that payment and go back with an error that you still have a pending transaction. And then now we have the we have here, we want now to save that transaction to the database. So if you don't have any pending transaction, we save that transaction to the database. Here you can see this new transaction. A transaction has user ID, and then transaction has a transaction ID, and then the cart. We encode that, because you can't save JSON, and encode it first, and then after that we save to the database. So that transaction has been saved, but now it has a status that is pending, right? The default status is 0, which is pending. And now after creating that transaction, we proceed now to payment. Now the payment part begins here, or starts here. So we get the phone number of the user, because we've gotten the user who wants to pay here, and now we can get the user details like the phone number, and then we can get we first format that font so that it can appear in this format, 254. So it starts with 07, so you have to remove that 0 and replace it with 254, right? So that the formatted phone number is going to look like this. All right, so after that, after having that phone number, we also need what? We need amount. We need the amount that the user wants to pay for, and the amount is the total of the cart. So you can see we usually pass here cart total. I mean, in the request we pass there the cart total. So the cart total is actually the total amount, which is these 2 shillings that the user wants to pay for. And then, so the cart total here is the one that you pay as the amount that the user wants to pay. Then the party A is the phone number. So this formatted phone number is the one that we use. Then the party B is the pay bill number. So we are using this test pay bill number. And then also the phone number, you use the phone number that the user wants to pay. Then the callback URL here, this is the URL that after, if that payment goes through successfully or have any error, it is going to be sent to this pay bill. It is to be sent to this callback URL. And now from here you can receive the response and destructure it, or just get the detail that you want from that specific response, and then you save the data to the database. And that is it. Then the reference number, you can just enter like the organization name, whatever, right? Then here are the remarks. So after that, now if you have all these details, now you can initialize the STK push. Okay, so just use this STK push simulation M-PESA, and then initialize STK push simulation. You initialize it, but you have to pass there the business code, Lipa and M-PESA passkey, the transaction type, amount, party A, party B, phone number, callback URL, account reference, transaction description, and then remarks, right? And then after that, what are we doing? We are clearing the cart. So I said that I'm not going to talk about that, but you have to clear this cart because there's no point where the user has paid and it comes back to the page and has items in the cart. So that's why we are clearing the cart at this point, and then redirect the user to the transactions, where the user is going to see that the transaction is pending here. The transaction has been made, but then it is still pending, right? And then as that transaction is still pending, so what do you do? So you have left everything to M-PESA because you have already sent the STK push. So if the user enters the PIN, what you are going to do, M-PESA is going to complete that payment, and it is going to send us the callback URL with the data. Okay, it's going to send the data that comes. So let me just open Postman and show you the structure of that data that is sent by M-PESA. So for Sandbox, this is the structure of the data that is sent. Okay, so always you'll get this data. So for example, you can see the data is inside this response description. So these are very important. You can get the response code. If it is 0, you know that there is no error. Okay, otherwise there will be error. And then I have the result description. So the service the service request is processed successfully. So if it is processed successfully, you know that it has gone through successfully. And then you know that STK push has been initialized. So, and then now you have the callback metadata, and this is the most important part, because this is where you get now the data that you want. For example, the amount, and then the M-PESA receipt number, which is like P whatever is confirmed and paid this amount of money. And then the transaction date, and then you have the phone number, right? And other information that this is just for the Sandbox, but for the live we get a lot of details. the balance and many other details. So I worked with this because many people had problems how to get data from here. But basically that is what we are doing in this function. So this function is the one that handles the response that is sent back from M-PESA. So the first thing, you have to decode that JSON object and get the content. Then after that, you get the response data, and you can say you are targeting the metadata. So call back metadata object because that is the one that has the data that we need. So the callback metadata, this one here, you can see it is the one that has the phone number, the balance, the amount paid. So that is what we are targeting here, as REST data. And then the code, we need that code. So if it is 0, you know that there is no error. And then you have the response. So the message, so that is the message that the survey has gone through successfully. And then you have the amount paid. So this is how we extract the amount paid using the REST data. And then this is how we extract the transaction ID. So that is the M-PESA transaction ID. And this is how we extract the phone number. So this code, I'm going to leave it in the description of this video. And then so after this, if we get these details, what do you want to do? We want to format that phone number because we don't want to save it to the database as it comes as 254, right? It comes as 254 7050522, that number. But we want to format it so that we can save it as 07 whatever, right? So we are replacing 254 with 0. So this is how it comes. It comes as 254 7. So you can replace it with this number, but what we are going to do, we are doing here, we just replacing, you are replacing 254 with 0 so that you can save it in the format that other numbers are saved in the database as 07. Alright, but you can save it this way if you want, still okay. Okay, and now after that, since we used the user's phone number to pay, we are able to get that specific user by just doing user is equals to user, where the phone is equals to this phone that has been returned but has to be formatted. Okay, and we get the first user. And now if we have the user, we can get that transaction. We can also get the transaction where the user ID is equals to the user here. And then now we update the status. So where the status is equals to 0, we want to update that status to 1 because the payment has been completed. And then you have the transaction ID. Now we set it to the transaction ID, and now we initialize the new payment here and we save the payment here, right? And immediately after saving the payment, that is when we change the transaction from pending to completed, and that is it. So basically that is how you implement that using Laravel. I've just explained this code, but then before this I had explained that you need to relate this table so that you can access this information. Of course, I know that if you are doing this, you are not a beginner in Laravel. At least you have some information how to relate the tables and how to whatever application you're working on. So I think that is it, but let's just test this so that you can see it working. So I just want to close Grok, not Grok actually, to close that, and then I think Grok is running. Yes, it is still running. So what I want, I already copied this URL I think and then updated here. So what I want to do is to try to pay and see what happens, right? So let me just go to the application here and then to the cart, and I'll try to check out. So you can see that a new transaction has been initialized with the status pending, and I'm getting the SDK push on my phone. So I just want to pay, to enter the PIN. And as I enter the PIN, I want you to watch this. So if we get the request, we'll see here, we'll see the response sent here, right? So So I've done that. Let's wait. And you can see here the response that's right away. You have the response 200, right, from M-PESA. And then now after that, you see the status is pending. But then if we click on payments, you can see we have this payment that has been made and the amount is 2, right? And then if we go to transactions here, you can see that transaction status has been marked as completed. So that's awesome. And you see, that's basically how it works. So in case you have any question, you can just ask in the comment section there, and I'll be able to reply to that. Thank you so much. And if you have not subscribed to my channel, and you find this content helpful, you can subscribe to my channel for more content like this.